Hi, welcome to the second episode of AI for Absolute Beginners. The second thing that we're going to look into is the data. In machine learning, the AI, we separate data into three different chunks. The first is training data. The second is validation data. The third is a test data. It's not difficult, but it's something that you must know. I'm going to explain about the train, validation, and the test data using the three different books. So let's say these are the data that I have. But among them, the biggest chunk of the data is the training data. I'm a machine learning model, and I'm going to learn the different kinds of data by looking at this book. I'll be just going through repetitive process, learning the data and the pattern inside it. After I learned a certain task by looking into training data, we have another question. How are we gonna prove that this model is functioning well? What if my model is just working so well on the training data, and we're being deceived by the results of the training data? So there's a question about the evaluation. How are we going to validate that this model is working well? And this is where the validation data comes from. Let's say these are the rest of the data that we have. Let's say this training data took about 70 to 80% of the whole data that we have. Mostly these validation and test data takes like 10% and the 10%. So let's look into the validation data. One of the ways to validate it is called a k-fold cross-validation. So it's about, if we have training data, we divide it into k different sectors. Commonly, we use 5 different sectors, and we call it a 5-fold cross-validation. We divide the training data into 5 different chunks. And then when we train the data, we use only the rest of the part except the one chunk. And then after training the model with the training data, we apply this model to the validation results. In this way, we'll have 5 different validation results compared to the training data. It's a good way of validating how robust this model is. So the last bit of the thing that we have is a test data. So let's say this is a test data. Why do we need a test data if we train and validate it? This test data takes a critical role because we're trying to see in a final stage if our model will be able to apply it in a real world. So the assumption under the separation of the data is that data always changes, and the data that we have is not the perfect data. The data that I have says, let's say, have a trend of saying that people are likely to prefer the healthy food. But maybe in the real world data, if we want to apply it to the model, the data might change, and it might have a different perspective mix, such as, oh, actually, people do enjoy a fast food, and some people have different dietary requirements, like only protein-based meal. Then, after the stage of training, validating, and test data, then we'll be able to guarantee and confidently say that this model will perform in this extent based on our evaluation metrics. Okay, let's summarize. When we divide the data, we can divide into training data, validation data, and the test data. Training data is the main data set that the model learns from, and the validation data is the part that explains about how well does it actually work. And the test data is like a final exam for the model. Apply your model into the test data, then you'll have the output that you can compare if this model is performing well and will be able to apply it well in the real world. Next episode, we're going to learn about the overfitting and the underfitting, which is also relevant to what we learned today, training, validation, and the test data. Stay tuned, and if it was helpful, subscribe and like.